welcome to episode 292 of Retro Encounter. I'm Eva Padilla, and I'm joined today by my friend Pete. Pete, what's going on?
Oh, how's it going, my fellow fallen knight, Eva?
Oh, it's going. It's really going. So, we are gathered here today to discuss a very interesting RPG. What are we covering, Pete?
Oh, this is finally the hotly anticipated episode that the masses have been clamoring for about Knights in the Nightmare.
We've been trying to do this episode. For a while, and I'm really glad that we could get around to it, because this is as we'll go into, this is an interesting game. This is really something. It's not something you see every day in terms of mechanics or in terms of narrative. And I'm excited to get into it. So, I suppose we should start off with what exactly is Knights in the Nightmare, because this is not your most popular, Final Fantasy title or something that we'd cover on Retro Encounter. So, yeah.
Knights in the Nightmare. It's a Sting game made by the developer Sting, published by Atlas. I think those of us who are familiar in this space kind of know what to expect from Atlas a little bit. And Knights of the Nightmare doesn't really follow what you might expect. Atlas does tend to publish some pretty maybe experimental or games that are a little bit out of the ordinary, but this one is really interesting. And it's a Sting RPG. And Sting is a pretty cool company. They really, for a while, made these really almost like boutique RPGs, usually for handheld systems, that I've played two of. I played Yggdra Union for the Game Boy Advance, and that is like a Fire Emblem, but it has a lot of weird mechanics that end up making a lot of sense and is really smart. It's really, really good. It's one of my favorite like turn-based tactics RPGs, especially on the GBA. And these are technically part of the same narrative universe, but they don't really have too terribly much to do with each other. So Knights in the Nightmare. Eva, why don't you try your hand at describing kind of what it is?
Well, I tried to do like a sort of elevator pitch for it. Like if someone went up to me and said, "What is Knights in the Nightmare?" And what I could think of was non-linear SRPG bullet hell. That's kind of the best way to describe it, I think. And I think with Atlas's publishing at this time was kind of strange, because I think in within a few months of this, they also were publishing Demon Souls for From Software. So because at least in North America, and so they were kind of dipping into maybe not uncharted territory, but not their usual developed in-house sort of work. So it might sound strange to say non-linear SRPG bullet hell, but
that's because it is strange. Very strange. So the thing about describing how this game plays, or the experiential part of the game, it's hard to talk about it apart from the plot or the themes even. It's non-linear in the sense that the plot is told in a non-linear fashion. Mm-hmm. You will experience the story, like you'll get a snippet from the past and from the present and from the future, or not the future, but like further back in the past or whatever. That's kind of how you'll experience the story. When you play it, there's no overworld. There's no real walking around and speaking to NPCs, or there's no random encounters. It is just story vignettes followed by an action mission, basically.
Yeah, it's interesting with these vignettes because there are so many characters in this game, And they kind of, each one of these scenes that they have, because the game plays out in these scenes, focuses on these specific characters that you're kind of adding to your forces. And there isn't a whole lot, at least as far as I've seen so far, there isn't really a whole lot of character development necessarily. But as you go through the game more, I kind of understand why isn't there character development? And it kind of makes at first I was a little put off by it because maybe I liked a character aesthetically like Erica or Michelle, and I wanted more from them. But as I've come to understand the game, and we'll probably get more into next episode, it makes sense why there's not really, they're not progressing much in terms of their own internal processes.
So one thing that this game does that I've always noted is pretty interesting, and we'll get into the background of it and the foundation of kind of the plot in a second, is because most of the characters you don't have too much time with. I find this game to be really great at doing the best they can at packing a lot of history and motivation and character into a very, let's say, small amount of text. And yeah, you don't get a full character arc, and we'll get into why in a second. But for example, there are characters that are basically just NPCs on the mission field as you play, and through a mechanic in the game, you get a chance to talk to them, which almost serves as like the talking to NPCs part of the game, although they don't give you any direction or anything. They do give you a little item. But it's literally, think of an RPG text box and how many characters go in there. It's 2 lines of that each of these characters get, and it's always crushingly tragic. And I find that to be really powerful, because by design you don't get to know these characters too much. And so the game takes place in this nation, the capital of which is Abentheim Castle, and you are a little spirit wisp thing. That is who you embody in the game. And you're basically manifested as a little ball of light. And all the characters you come in contact with, everyone that can be in your party, anyone you can recruit, they're already dead, because there was a massive apocalyptic occurrence that happened, in which the underworld busted through, and just in a really short amount of time, and as you go throughout the game, you hear these characters talk during the story vignettes, and what's evident is how little they know about the situation, how taken by surprise everyone is. Basically, the power structure in the nation is completely crushed. It's chaos, and a lot of people are dead very, very quickly. How'd you were you able to kind of grok that from the part that you played?
Yeah, I mean, it was as of this recording, it was very recently that I realized what was going on, that these characters were all dead, because I think what made me realize it was that there's this mechanic in the game where you can basically release a character's soul to get an item, or to give power to another one of the forces that you have, another one of the characters. And I was wondering how exactly that worked. And then I was thinking about these flashbacks that they had, and the NPCs that would show up, and I realized, oh, they're dead. And
yep.
This is the spirit of their... This is kind of a manifestation of their willpower and the times before they passed that we're seeing play out. And because of that, it's a little difficult to follow at first, but as it goes on more and more, it becomes more engrossing, and this story is very plot-driven, rather than being character-based. And once you get that rhythm for it, that it's trying to tell this story in a very unique way, I think you can really start to vibe with what it's doing and how exactly the mechanics are tying into that and helping to tell that story.
Yeah, so it might be a good place to talk about that at this point. The mechanics really don't make sense until you realize the decisions they made, in my opinion, truly are tied to the themes that they're going for. And the result is one of the most creative games mechanics-wise that I've ever played. And it seems downright silly, but it's so much fun, but it also beautifully it kind of puts you in this world and in this situation. So when you start a battle, it'll show you a preview of the map. It calls itself turn-based in quotes, but you don't play it in a turn-based fashion. There are turns, which are basically rounds, and you have to complete the mission within a certain number of rounds. And when you start off, usually there are already characters on the map, knight characters, soldier characters that you can use. And for that mission, they're there as guests. And the mechanic we were referring to release someone's soul or to give them some kind of peace or closure or whatever, is you pick up items as you play the game by breaking obstacles on the field. And then if they relate to that character, you can give it to them. And if it's an NPC, a non-combatant type character, then they'll give you a weapon and they'll give you their little bit of story that I mentioned. If they're a knight, someone you can recruit, then that's how you recruit them. And they also have a little bit of text. It's the same. They do the same thing, but then you can also take them into the following missions. And on the DS, so this is awesome because Eva, you played the PSP version.
Yes.
And I'm playing the DS version, which I played before. And on the DS, you use the stylus on the bottom screen, but you're looking at the top screen. Top screen is where the action is. But the bottom screen is like the input. And as you move the stylus around, you're moving the wisp around. And as enemies on the field attack, they shoot out basically bullet hell patterns. They don't attack you directly. There's no HP for you to lose. Even the knights that you can recruit, except for there is a stat called vitality on those knights. And if you use them, their vitality will creep down ever so slightly. There are only a very few number of enemies, including like a boss character, that can directly attack a knight and take down their vitality in the process. Otherwise, they basically also don't ever get hit. But when an enemy attacks, they shoot out a bullet hell pattern, and you, as the wisp, have to dodge it. If you get hit, you lose time. So each turn, which is like a round, like we said, they give you about 60 seconds. But if you're not doing anything, even if you're moving around, if you're not doing anything short of interacting with a character or attacking or getting hit, you won't lose time. What makes you lose time is attacking someone or getting hit by one of these bullets, okay? And so when that time is up, the round is over, and you have a certain number of rounds to complete the mission. And each knight on the battlefield, it's not like Final Fantasy Tactics where you can select them and move them to a spot. Most of the time, with only a couple exceptions, they stay exactly where they are. And when you hover over them as the wisp, they basically materialize in the physical world, so to speak, and you charge up an attack, and they have an attack pattern that goes out on the battlefield in a set pattern, and every class of character has a different pattern. And so basically you want to catch the enemies in that attack range and release it to unleash your attack. That's the long and short of it.
Absolutely. And I love the fact that the wisp essentially is materializing all of this, because the enemies, your characters, they're just shown as these sort of vague outlines until you hover the wisp over them. And so it really is kind of like you're using the wisp to create or recreate this situation, this battle scenario. And there's so many little hiccups to it in terms of how a character's facing. The number of times where I've accidentally had a duelist just get stuck has It's taken me some time to understand. Okay, the duelist gets stuck. So if I get the duelist stuck, then I need to have the the mounted knight on the horse to move them, because it's either the duelist or the mounted knight who can do this.
Who can actually move. Yeah,
exactly,
move.
Right.
Yeah, and so there's like a warrior who's like an axe carrying one. And this is important because the different weapons you select as items, and you're supposed to actually drag them over to the knight that you want to attack. That's the only way you can do any real damage. If you just unleash an attack without a weapon, basically they'll do no damage. But you can gather gems, which add to a meter, which allows you to use the weapons. You can see how this gets batshit real quick. But so like the knights, the warriors and like the duelists, they face either up or right or left. I don't remember. And then the archers, the priests, and the assassins and the wizards, you want them in the northernmost part of the map because they face down. And you can't cause a character to face any way they wouldn't face. Yeah. And it sounds limiting. It sounds kind of dumb, but it's cool because it gives you an opportunity to use all these different classes. And between each round, you place them on the map. So the placement becomes critically important. And the positioning aspect of it, I really like. It really comes into its own as a cool mechanic that's valid in its own right, and not just like, silly for silliness' sake. That's pretty cool, I think.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, and it allows you to, between each of these rounds, really kind of notice what exactly you have to do to be able to accomplish your objective. And for each round, your objective may be kind of different. I've noticed that in the earlier rounds, I'm like, okay, this is the the first 2 rounds, usually there's what I've seen is like 6 to 9 rounds or something. Usually in the first couple of rounds, what I'll do is I'll have some objects that I've received from earlier levels, and the objects will say, oh, Michelle might like this, or Erica might like this, and you set that, and then you're not really focused on defeating the enemies, you're focused on getting those items to those characters, and then breaking open other chests so you can get more items to recruit characters later on. And then once it gets into the later rounds of it, that's when you're going to want to be defeating enemies, because between each round, there's this roulette that goes, and you can choose which enemies you want to fight during that. I almost always choose, if I can, choose the spiders, because I love the spiders in this game and how they look. They're so cool.
I like the big tree like ent creature ladies. They will appear. They obviously don't move, and I don't think we mentioned this, or maybe we did, but elemental affinity is really important. So each enemy and each weapon has an element assigned to it, and you want to get those matchups to get like double damage and all that. The trees will stay rooted, and there'll be a certain element, and they'll be doing their attacks. They're still shooting bullets at you, but then they'll disappear and then pop up in another part of the map as a different element. Mm-hmm. It's pretty cool. Yeah, there's some enemies you can jam, like if they're about to attack, or if you hit them during a certain circumstance, a little like square with a number will pop up. And on the DS, on the PSP too, but probably with the analog stick, you have to take the wisp and whip it around, and like each rotation of the square will count down the number, and if you successfully count it all the way down to 0, they'll jam and be stunned for like a turn. It gets pretty cool. Yeah,
I hadn't figured that out. I've seen that before, but I didn't know what to do with it. Okay.
Some of that same mechanic appears sometimes to change an enemy's element if you want. So sometimes it's a countdown to stun them, and sometimes you can change their element by switching it around, and you can basically in a very short amount of time try to select an element that might be more advantageous to you.
That's I didn't know crazy. That's pretty wild.
And this roulette that you mentioned, each enemy that you kill corresponds to a battle grid, which basically is like playing tic-tac-toe. So you want to connect a row, a column, or a diagonal line of enemies on that battle grid in order to beat the level. That's how you do it. That's how you finish the mission. Mm-hmm. It's not just defeating all the enemies. You have to line them up, and maybe if you want to gain a little bit of extra XP, maybe you don't want to complete a line and go an extra round or something. I don't know. But it's and there's like law and chaos, 2 different states that change the attack patterns. It's so absolutely wild, and it took me the first time I played it like 3 months of playing off and on before I like got into a rhythm. And I didn't have the obligation of a podcast to play it. I was just playing it for my own curiosity. But once you get it, it all coalesces, and it's a really satisfying thing to learn such a crazy thing.
Yeah, and with all of the mechanics in this game and everything that's going on here, there's some interesting decisions that are made on an aesthetic level. In terms of the positives, I think this game, in terms of the environment design, especially playing it on the PSP, it looks gorgeous. The backgrounds look fantastic. The sprite art, the way the characters animate as well, I think is really nice. It's got some great coloration as well. I really like the way it looks.
Yeah, it's really like dark in that it's always nighttime, but it's actually a really colorful game graphically. There's a lot of deep purples and blues, and it's a really cool palette that they have. And it's kind of a sting thing around this era, especially where this was also the era of like, well, the era. It was in an era, one of many, of anime with enormous swords and crazy wild armor. But when you look at the swords and the armor in this game, the amount of intricacy and like opulence to all the design is really cool, and it even comes across a little bit in the sprites, but definitely in the character portraits. And yeah, it's such a nice looking game. I think it helps bring the tragedy home, kind of like the beauty of this place. You can see flashbacks of, different rooms or structures intact, and then when you get there to have a battle there, it's all torn apart. Like in the library, there's books thrown everywhere. It's an awesome thing. All the monsters are really cool, like we said before. So
yeah, and a lot of little subtle animation tricks that are designed to show emotion and and trying to communicate how the characters are feeling. It's a great looking game, and the music is quite good as well. It definitely has that classic tactics RPG sort of feel to it. But it does things on its own terms as well. I think Knights in the Nightmare has its own soundscape that really works for it.
Have you noticed the kind of mysterious, as of yet unnamed narrator?
Yes, I mean I have noticed that. I haven't really questioned who this narrator is yet, though.
Yeah, the narrator kind of addresses you as the Wisp. Like, what motivates you? What's driving you? Like, you don't remember anything. Why are you going? You just killed all those monsters. You even know why. It's pretty cool. And that same voice, I think, is what is the text that comes up when you're about to start a mission. And that song, I think, is beautiful. It's like this bell number that's just very mournful and really nice, and this vague, mysterious text is going across it, while in the background, fading in and out, are the different crests of all the orders of the Knights of the Kingdom. And so, like that song in particular, I find really powerful. It happens between every mission and never gets old because it's a very short number. There's some really good sad songs. The battle music's pretty good, and I like the soundtrack quite a bit.
So I think the music and the art they really have this nice harmony to them that really present this game extremely well.
It is necessary because it's so weird to play.
Yeah.
Forever, what carried me to a point to where I liked playing this game a lot was the music and the art. Mm-hmm. And the writing was cool too, because it's a different kind of story. It's weird to have a apocalypse story that's during an apocalypse, or it's a little bit more unusual in a fantasy setting. It's really neat though.
Yeah. It makes a lot of bold decisions. And for the most part, those really work for me. The one thing that I've brought up with you is the interface and the font choices. I'm like, there's a whole lot of fonts going on in this game, and
it's a mid-2000s game.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And Sting games, I've looked at them. I was looking at other Sting games, like, do they all kind of have this sort of font hell to them? And yeah, kind of.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, they do.
The interface itself does, in terms of functionality, does a really good job of presenting the information. There's a lot of it on there, but all of it feels pretty necessary for what you're doing. Just in terms of readability with these choices, though, I do question if they needed like 10 different fonts for the battle screen. There's really no uniformity to that, where a lot of other things in the game feel so holistic, and so much of this entire piece that kind of fit in so well together that the mass jumble of fonts feels a little at odds with that idea.
It is weird. It's strange because it does have to convey so much information. And maybe they were trying to compartmentalize parts of the screen, but I don't think it worked really. It's something that you gotta you get used to if you decide to like follow through and decide you're gonna play this game, you know?
Yeah. I looked at a couple of screens for Gungnir, which is the Department Heaven game after this one.
Yeah.
And that one's worse. So
no way. I actually haven't really looked at that one too much. I've been meaning to play it, but
on every level but that, I would love to play Gungnir, but the interface is just, it looks worse. But other than that, it also looks like a fine game as well. One thing that's interesting about this story is that this is this Department Heaven series. This is apparently episode 4 of it. I believe Riviera was the first one, and then Yggdrasil Union, I think, is the second.
I think that's right. Yeah.
This is the 4th, and then Gungnir is the 5th. There is no episode 3 as of now. I saw something online that said it was originally planned to be some sort of PC MMORPG that was abandoned.
Oh my word!
Yeah, and I can kind of imagine this was being, if this is the timeline they're following, they're probably developing that game around 2007 and 2008. And I think big financial decisions for a small boutique developer around that time may have been rough. May have been, that might have been hey, we should probably go back to making a handheld game instead of doing a PC MMORPG, while Lehman Brothers is going under or something.
Yeah, especially because Riviera and Yggdrasil Union really blew the doors off of the world.
Oh yeah, just like they were massive.
Just annoying. Like if you are within the sound of our voices, you have played those games. I just know it. Yeah, it's they should do like a manga or something for episode 3. Just whatever. Just do it. Yeah,
just to kind of tie it all together. I mean, if if budget is a concern, yeah, you can do a manga, you can do a novel a la Final Fantasy 15 or something.
Right. Yeah. A full-length feature film.
Yeah, of course.
You want to put butts in the seats? You make a Department Heaven Episode 3 film.
Department Heaven, the spirits within.
That's what they're clamoring for over there.
There's definitely a niche of people, and perhaps people who are listening to this episode right now, who would definitely be down for that, though. I think these games definitely have a following, and I can see why. They're making decisions that other RPGs wouldn't really, and they're not perfectly successful, but playing through Knights in the Nightmare, I'd say that this a lot of it is quite successful, and it more than justifies its existence, which
it does. I think we could probably maybe get a little into the plot at this point. We only briefly mentioned a couple things, and I kind of anticipated this because the feeling this game gives you and the action of playing it is worth some discussion, even if the discussion is not adequate to actually convey what it's like. But I really think that it was worth all that talk. But perhaps a little talk of the plot would even further help understand why the game plays like it does. So the game opens with an armored maiden. I think it's right from the beginning, it's clear that she is stealing the king's soul. She's spiriting it away from its sepulcher. I don't know. And the guards seem to not know who she is, and they chase her out of the castle. And so that's kind of where the game starts. You're like in the middle of nowhere. She says, "I gotta go," basically, and leaves you by yourself for a while. And you basically make your way back to the castle, which is kind of funny, but I don't think she intended to take you so far. I think she just chased out. And it's clear that something is driving you toward the castle. And pretty soon you learn that you are the king of this nation. And so you're the dead king. And it's all very mysterious. Early on, you meet Cardinal Cape Horn, who's like kind of a papal figure who, since it's a JRPG, he's super bad, and it's very obvious from the beginning. He's manipulative. He is power hungry. He has made the deal with the underworld that has caused all of this. And so basically you go back and forth between between what happened in the past and what's happening currently. Early on, it's mostly what happened in the past that you're seeing, and little by little, it's almost as if the king is kind of regaining a little bit of his memory. But it's told in this jumbled up fashion that doesn't make its chronology clear, and it's kind of hard to follow until later on, but it does the job of kind of sinking its hook into you, and kind of making you want to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, it definitely draws you in. It confuses you at first and keeps you a bit off kilter and wondering what exactly is going on. And it does eventually draw you in and really places you into this world. And in terms of, with JRPGs, there being, if there's a sort of papal figure, they're probably going to be bad. It kind of makes me think, you know what? It would be interesting if the Vatican made a JRPG just for freshness. Let's
get a VRPG out there.
Yeah, a VRPG.
Let's do it.
Let's get
their perspective. It is so obvious too. This guy walks around. His little sprite is just flowing robes, a huge not crucifix, but crucifix, resting on his shoulder, and the biggest tome of all time in his other hand. And that's just how he casually hangs out at his house. You know what I mean? Like, he's in his inner sanctum chilling out, and he's just walking around with this big book. Like, is he reading it? I don't know. Have you met where you are? Have you met so you fought the werewolf?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
Did you discovered who that is?
I don't think I've fully gotten who it is yet. No.
Okay. So the cardinal, you know, obviously was like an officer of yours. He was like, and he was a head of kind of, if not like the religious branch of your government, he's someone who interacted with you a lot. The king a lot. And that werewolf who you fight really early on, so, you know, you're fighting through monsters in the forest. Eventually you come across this werewolf and you kill the werewolf. And soon after you discover that was the prince, your son, who was betrothed to marry Peach. Have you met Peach?
Yes, I believe so. Yeah.
So he was going to marry her. That's Caporn's daughter. So very early on, you have to kill your own son, who's been turned into a werewolf tragically by the forces of the underworld. And it's pretty cool. As I don't know if it's around that time or a little bit later on, you discover that there's something going on with your son, or there was around the time of the tragedy, that he was suffering from some kind of like depression because he had some duty he was supposed to attend to and expressed that he couldn't do it. And to the game's credit, they kind of treat that well. I think, like, you can't do it. We're not going to like force this thing. And so you go instead, and it's clear that that's what Cardinal Caporn wanted. He wanted you to go to this, to fulfill this duty. I think to inspect soldiers in some outpost or something. And there's a lot of back and forth of like, oh, this is the prince's first real like royal kind of mission. This is a great opportunity for him. And then the cardinal's like, yeah, but he's not feeling up to it. You just go, like, let it, you know, he'll have time to blah, blah, blah. You go. And the cardinal's just a manipulative guy. And it's obvious from the very beginning. But yeah.
Yeah, even I think the first scene that we see with the cardinal is him with the princess, and he's like, he comes across rather warmly, and he's saying, oh, it's so good to see you. I haven't seen you in so long. And if you were to, if you had never played a JRPG before or something, you'd probably see that and be like, nice old man. Immediately that gets thrown out. But
she leaves and he takes a meeting with like Yelma or someone.
Yeah.
To plan something nefarious.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And he's working with, kind of these cutthroats and everything, who have very cool designs. I like the looks of those characters.
Leonel is cool.
Yeah.
Aquila is cool too. She's like a crossbow user, and Leonel has like, it's hard to describe. It's like a big sword, but it also loops around like the front of him as like almost a scythe or something, or I don't know. It's wild. So the Cardinal's working with them, and Yelma, who's a witch, who's just like, she's the Kefka, basically. Like the Kefka stand-in, like no redeeming qualities, no, not fooling anyone, you know. Pretty much not long after you kill the werewolf, you meet up again with the Armored Maiden. You discover that her name is Maria, and you don't know anything about her. But for some reason, she's helping you, and she's really intent on helping you. But at the same time, she's looking for a staff called Ancardia, and she doesn't really want to involve you in it. It's just like another thread, and that's kind of something she's really there for. But for some reason, she's also really intent on helping you. And right after that, you meet Melissa. Melissa is a super awesome looking fallen angel type person who, as it turns out, is also looking for the staff Ancardia. And there are a few boss fights with Melissa that are pretty neat, but in the next episode, we'll talk more about why she's so important. At this point, we haven't truly discovered why, but she like almost never talks. She's very obedient to Caporn and the witch, who is made clear early on are working with the underworld. And there's another power figure from the underworld that's manipulating everything from Caporn on down. And then as you continue, you make it back to the castle, you meet up with Maria, you're both kind of trudging along. You split up here and there because she's like going to go here to look for Ancardia while you continue. The narrator asks, like, are you looking for your corpse? Like, do you want to reunite with your remains? Is that what's going on? And around that time, it shows flashbacks of Caporn manipulating Grand Marshal Gunther, who's almost like your top general of the military, who's all broken up about your death. He gets Yelma to create a replica of the king's armor that's also cursed, and he says, if you wear this, the people will look to you as an interim leader. It will really help calm their anxieties. And Gunther, in his weakness and in his emotional state of missing the king, who he was very close to, goes with it and becomes corrupted immediately. And he's also a boss fight. That's very sad. A very sad boss fight. And at this point as well, I'm blitzing through it because I know this is all gonna kind of come to a head in the next episode, and there's a lot in the next episode. As the Wisp advances deeper into the castle, the underworld leader who is in charge of Caporn, or who made a deal with Caporn and therefore basically has Caporn in his back pocket, says, hey, why haven't you told me about this? And Caporn is like, I didn't think it would concern you. I didn't want to bother you with petty things. And he says, you realize this is the one thing that has power over me potentially. If it gets to its potential, it will be able to destroy me. And you didn't tell me about it. And as punishment, he takes Peach and transforms her into like an unsentient winged bird human monstrosity thing as punishment to Caporn. And that's a really good moment because it's clear from that moment that Caporn is sincere about his daughter. He never intended to get her involved or manipulate her, and it ruins him even more. And so, yeah, that's kind of where we're at this point where we are around chapter 23. I didn't do this in either of my playthroughs, but you can recover Ancardia for Maria, and that can open up a way to eventually get a different ending. There are several different endings to this game. But the ending I got last time and the one I'm on the path to get right now, in my opinion, is the best canonical one. Because it's just so you know, if you want to go for that or like look it up when you get to that point, that might be something you want to see. But it's up to you. You don't have to do that. But yeah, anyway, plot wise, that's kind of where we're at this point. You're in the castle. Everyone's getting kind of freaked out. And now there's chaos on both sides. There's chaos on the underworld side, not understanding the situation that they thought they had under control. And obviously on the regular world side, everyone's dead pretty much. So, and their souls are being kind of recruited to your cause. And
that's how it goes. You plays the Wisp, you materialize some souls, you fight some monsters that may have been in the past, and you take on the papacy. And isn't that just all what we're trying to do?
it's just life from how I see it.
It's just life.
This is just a game about life. And yeah, so I mean, the thing about this plot is there's no comic relief. There's no relief. Like, my memory and the what I'm corroborating right now in this playthrough is that it's just an onslaught of darkness and tragedy, and it's over and over, because even though the battle's basically over, you're gaining these memories of what happened to these people. And so it's like an inescapable, like, tragedy. And I give the game a lot of credit for that. They could have very easily given Maria like a monkey pet or something, you know.
Yeah.
But the game is very clear in its theming and messaging. Like, sometimes there's nothing to laugh at. There's nothing to. Sometimes, you know, it's hard to find a break when things just suck.
Yeah, it is kind of a singularly oppressive atmosphere that I don't usually. There usually is something in a JRPG that does kind of offer some levity, whether that's an animal sidekick, or that's the cocky best friend who is hitting on all the women in the game and just getting totally shot down or something. There's really none of that in this game, and I really appreciate that as well, that they committed to what they're trying to tell in the story, and they're not letting kind of diversions from that lessen the impact of it.
It doesn't hurt for variety either, because there are so many characters, there's so many threads, like this thing with Ancardia and some other threads that will crop up later. There's Frabella and Vishna, who are characters you can recruit, but who actually appear kind of throughout the telling of the story. They kind of move from location to location, so you see them over and over again. There's a kind of how you get to know Maria, and the little bit of development with Cape Horn that kind of peaks at this point. He doesn't really go too much further in his character development, and like, plot wise, even though the tone is consistent, it still somehow avoids getting old, I think.
Yeah, there definitely is enough thematic and narrative variety, and just with the number of characters as well, that it doesn't feel like a slog. And because of how fun it is to play, it kind of continues. It allows you to continue with that story and engage with it further.
It's kind of fast paced, because each mission takes, like, some of them you can finish in 5 minutes, some might take like a little more. And then the story vignettes are about the same amount of time, maybe 5 to 10 minutes of, 10 minutes would be really long, probably not that long, but, of story, and of flashing back. And those kind of 3 modes of storytelling it has, of like past, present, and like an overarching narrator, also break it up in a way that makes it feel quicker. Perfect for a handheld game that's trying to tell an ambitious story.
Absolutely. I think ambition is one thing that this game has in spades. And I can't wait to see more of what exactly this game has in store, and how these mechanics mutate, how this narrative continues, and where exactly it goes from here.
Oh, it's going to go some places from here. We should do predictions. You don't have to say where you are or anything, but what do you foresee anything? Do you have any kind of foundation to stand on to be able to be like, I think such and such might happen with so and so? I'd be interested to hear what you. I'd put you on the spot.
Yeah, no, it's fine. I'm interested to see where exactly Maria falls in terms of being a protagonist or an antagonist, because she's kind of been set up as this, I guess, a bit of a chaos actor in this. It seems that she is some sort of protagonist in some way. You know, she's on the box for some of the art for when this game is released around the world.
She's also playable. She's very importantly, when she's in your party, you can't take her off the board, but you can, through one of her attacks, move her anywhere, and she can use any of the weapons. They're trying to say, like, this person's not dead, I think.
And they have the full range of their capabilities.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, so I guess it wasn't really much of a prediction, more of just a question, but I predict that Maria will face some sort of trial that may turn her into something of an antagonist in the story. And I think she will overcome that, but I think it'll get hairy for a little bit.
Good prediction. I like that one. Great prediction.
Well, thank you. Well, I think that's going to wrap us for episode 1 of our dive into the nightmare that is Knights in the Nightmare, though it's, not really a nightmare to play. It's quite enjoyable. So, Pete, thanks for joining me on this episode, and I can't wait to do the next one.
Thank you for doing it. I gotta say, I've kind of been quietly rumbling about wanting to do this one for a while, and you've been the champion to, like, get it over the hump, and I really appreciate that, because this is, like, I mean, I try not to be annoying about, like, we could do Knights in the Nightmare, but it's very understandably not one that many people are that interested in or want to, get into, even the question of, like, whether or not the audience is, like, really wanting to hear it, which hopefully folks who don't know about it will hear it. That's my hope. But yeah, so I appreciate you helping me along on that one, fighting on my side.
Of course, and I think it's paying off because of what exactly this game is doing, as we've just spent the past hour talking about. So, listeners, thank you for joining us on this journey through the first part of Knights in the Nightmare. We'll be back for part 2 to talk more about Maria and the Wisp and all these dead knights we're playing as. But if you've enjoyed this, we would love it if you would like or rate us on the podcatcher of your choice. We are an RPG fan podcast, and we have 3 other fine podcasts. We have Random Encounter, which is about random things. We have Rhythm Encounter, which is about music things. And Phoenix Edge, our partner podcast, that usually talks about current events. So if you would like to catch any of those other fine podcasts, you can find them on the podcatcher of your choice, or you can see it on our website. So next month, after we're done with Knights in the Nightmare, we're going to be having some very fine episodes. We have Nier coming up, some more discussion on Nier, the visual novel Hakuoki, the Hakuoki Edo Blossoms and such, the Otome visual novel. And then we have an episode that we'll keep a little bit under wraps for right now, but it'll be a fun one. I'm very much looking forward to it. So, and I hope y'all will be too. And before we head out, Pete, how can we find you on social media or any other contacts?
You can find me on Twitter at PeteBarbero1. You can find me on Twitch at RG Halfpenny. Right now, they released a big update and DLC for Mech Warrior 5 Mercenaries. So I'm doing that. But sometimes I play like Genshin Impact on that. And I'm then thinking about doing some more RPG stuff. But it's Mech Warrior. Like, I don't know what else to tell you. But that's RG Halfpenny on Twitch if you like robots. And PBarbaro1 on Twitter.
Absolutely. And to also speak of Genshin Impact, you just wrote an essay on Genshin Impact just recently that was very interesting about kind of the politics within that game. So I would very much encourage people to check that out as well.
Not so much the politics outside of that game. There's plenty written about that. You can find that stuff. But I think to the game's credit, the game is saying a little something. So thanks for reminding me that I did that. Yeah, that's there on RPG Fan.
Yes, of course, and yeah, the Genshin Impact is a complicated entity, but I think you really kind of pulled some things out of it that listeners would be very interested in.
I also played it every day since launch, and problem.
You and some of my students, you'll have to talk with them about it.
It's so good. It should not be this good. Why is it so good?
And listeners, if you would like to find me on social media, probably not talking about Genshin Impact, you can find me on Twitter under RPG Fan's usual social medias at RPG Fancom on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook. And you can find me personally as at EvaLees, EVA_LEES on Instagram or Twitter. So with that, everyone, thank you so much for listening, and we're looking forward to be back next week with you. It is a bit late. Have a wonderful night, and good night.
Good night.